If you ever mention the Tasmanian tiger around a campfire in Australia, someone will always have a story to share, and it's rarely about extinction. The thylacine was officially declared extinct in 1986, yet if you ask locals in Tasmania, some will swear the Tassie tiger is still out there. Over the years, there have been hundreds of reported sightings. Hikers, farmers, even park rangers have told stories of seeing a striped, dog-like creature slipping into the brush at dusk. There are grainy photos, shaky videos, plaster casts of paw prints, all tantalizing clues that never quite prove anything. Most scientists remain skeptical, and for good reason. None of the evidence has been conclusive. But the rumors refuse to die. Every few years, headlines pop up. Possible Tasmanian tiger sighting. And for a moment, everyone gets excited. Governments and enthusiasts have launched expeditions, set up camera traps, and offered rewards for proof. So far, the Tasmanian tiger itself hasn't shown up to the party. But these continued sightings, real or imagined, keep the legend alive. They speak to our hope that maybe, just maybe, we didn't lose this beautiful creature forever. The thylacine was one of a kind. It looked like a mix between a dog and a tiger, about the size of a medium dog, with brown fur and bold dark stripes across its back. But despite the nickname, it wasn't a tiger or a wolf. It was a marsupial, related to kangaroos and koalas. Yes, it had a pouch. In fact, both females and males had pouches. This carnivore was the top predator in Tasmania. It hunted mostly at night, stalking wallabies, possums, and birds. Farmers accused it of killing sheep and chickens, which led to bounties on its head, though later studies suggest it wasn't the sheep-killing machine people thought. Thylacines were shy, even timid around humans. In the few films we have, you see one yawning or pacing nervously. It had an oddly wide gape. It could open its jaws ridiculously far, almost like a snake unhinging its jaw. We think they lived in small family groups or pairs, sheltering in dens during the day and coming out at dusk. Sadly, by the early 1900s, they were rare. Hunting, habitat loss, and possibly disease wiped them out. The last known thylacine, often called Benjamin, died alone in a zoo in 1936 because it was accidentally left out in the cold, a heartbreaking end for a species. The Tasmanian tiger was gone, or so it seemed. It's hard to express how unique this animal was. A marsupial apex predator is something the world doesn't have anymore. That uniqueness is a big reason people are so fascinated and so haunted by guilt over its loss. Which brings us to the big question: can we do anything to bring it back? We've all thought about Jurassic Park at some point, bringing back dinosaurs from DNA. The thylacine isn't a dinosaur, but the idea of resurrecting it has scientists seriously buzzing. This field is called de-extinction, and it's exactly what it sounds like, using cutting-edge science to revive extinct species. So, could we bring the Tasmanian tiger back? Some researchers are determined to try, and leading the charge is a company called Colossal Biosciences. These guys have made headlines by announcing projects to resurrect the woolly mammoth and even the dodo. It sounds wild, but they've assembled serious genetic scientists to do it. And get this, Colossal recently claimed they created living direwolf pups. Yes, direwolves. Like those legendary giant wolves from the Ice Age. If you've seen Game of Thrones, you know the ones, except direwolves were real, and they went extinct around 13,000 years ago. Colossal says they've engineered the first direwolf puppies as the world's first de-extinct animals. Whether you take that claim with a grain of salt or not, it shows how fast this technology is moving. It's no longer just talk, they're actually attempting to bring lost creatures back to life. Now, for the Tasmanian tiger specifically, the plan is to genetically recreate it. How? First, you need DNA. Luckily, museums have preserved thylacine specimens, pelts, bones, even a pickled baby thylacine in a jar. Incredibly, Scientists have managed to sequence almost the entire thylacine genome from these old specimens. In other words, they've pieced together the instruction manual for building a thylacine. The Colossal team, in partnership with Aussie researchers like Professor Andrew Pask's team at Melbourne University, announced they have a genome that's 99.9% complete. That's huge. It means we have essentially the genetic blueprint of the Tasmanian tiger. The next step is to take a living cell from the thylacine's closest living relative and edit that cell's DNA to match the thylacine's genome. Easier said than done, but that's the idea. Here's a twist. The thylacine's closest living relative is not some other big predator. It's a tiny mouse-sized marsupial called the fat-tailed dunnet. It's almost adorable that the fate of resurrecting a tiger might lie with this little critter. Scientists would use gene editing tools to turn a dunnet embryo cell into a thylacine cell, essentially swapping in the thylacine code. Then they'd need to grow that into an embryo. Because a thylacine is much bigger than a dunnet, they might have to get creative, perhaps an artificial womb or some kind of marsupial surrogacy technique. In fact, Colossal's team has already developed methods to induce pregnancy in dunnets in the lab, which is a start. It's a complex process, and it hasn't been done before for something like a thylacine, but the folks at Colossal are optimistic. They've said that with these breakthroughs, we could see a Tasmanian tiger joey in as soon as 10 years. Some even say 5 years if everything goes perfectly. Now, not everyone believes this timeline. Many scientists say, hold on, prove you can do it in a peer-reviewed way. Skepticism is healthy here, because this is bleeding-edge science. But think about how amazing this is. For the first time in history, we have the tools that might undo an extinction. It won't be an exact 100% clone of the original thylacine. There might be tiny bits of dunnet DNA filling the gaps, but it would look and act like a thylacine. If Colossal's direwolf pups are real, it means we already have one example of bringing back an extinct animal, or at least a proxy of it. The thylacine could be next. Science is moving at a breakneck pace, and what was impossible a couple of decades ago is looking possible now. So, let's say it happens. The thylacine is back, not just in a lab, but on its feet, breathing, moving, blinking in the sunlight. That first one wouldn't be released right away, of course. It'd be raised in protected facilities, probably under tight watch. But eventually, if everything goes well, the big question would come up. Where do we put them? The most obvious place? Tasmania. It was their final refuge, and it still offers what thylacines love. Quiet forests, grassy plains, thick bushland. Places like the Tarkine Forest and Cradle Mountain region have huge areas with minimal human presence and plenty of native prey. Wallabies, bettongs, bandicoots, even some birds. These are exactly the kind of animals thylacines once hunted. They weren't built to take down anything massive. They were ambush predators, probably hunting solo or in pairs, going after animals they could surprise and overpower quickly. So, food-wise, no problem. In fact, bringing them back might help restore balance in the ecosystem. Tasmania has been struggling with feral cats and even a few wild dogs, species that weren't supposed to be there. They've been hammering small native wildlife. A predator like the thylacine could step in as a more natural top predator and give some of these species a break. It might actually help biodiversity. But predators don't exist in a vacuum, and thylacines would have competition. The Tasmanian devil is one. They're much smaller and more scavenger than hunter, but they might go after some of the same food or try to steal carcasses. That said, they coexisted in the past, and there's no reason they couldn't again. It might even give the devils a weird advantage. Scavenging leftovers from thylacine kills could help devils in the wild while they're still recovering from facial tumor disease. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather the dingo on the mainland. Long ago, thylacines lived right across Australia and even in parts of New Guinea. But when dingoes arrived around 3,500 to 4,000 years ago, brought by early seafarers from Asia, they likely outcompeted the thylacines on the mainland. Dingoes hunted in packs, were more aggressive and may have even targeted young thylacines. Over time, the tigers vanished from the mainland, leaving only the island population behind in Tasmania. So if we're thinking about reintroducing thylacines beyond Tasmania, that's where things get tricky. You wouldn't want to throw them into full dingo territory and expect them to do fine, but some fenced reserves or dingo-free zones could be a good testing ground. Places like Wilson's Promontory in Victoria or carefully selected parts of New South Wales, where dense forest still exists and invasive species control is possible, could be interesting trial sites. Even some offshore islands are worth considering. Australia has a number of predator-free conservation islands that might serve as stepping stones for rewilding efforts. But wherever we put them, one thing's clear. The world they're coming back into isn't the same one they left. Even in Tasmania, roadkill is a major issue for native animals. Thylacines wouldn't understand what a highway is. If they wander near traffic, it could end badly, especially at night when they're most active. We'd need things like wildlife crossings, signs, and probably public awareness campaigns to make sure people slow down in key areas. Then there's human conflict. Let's be honest, some farmers still wouldn't love the idea of a predator roaming near their sheep. Even though the old stories about thylacines wiping out livestock were probably overblown, the fear is still there. To make this work, there'd need to be good communication with rural communities, some education, and maybe even financial incentives or predator-proof fencing support to get everyone on board. All things considered, could a thylacine survive today? I believe so. With a lot of help initially, the key will be careful planning, picking the right release sites, monitoring them, and stepping in if something goes wrong. We wouldn't just toss them out there and hope for the best. It would be a hands-on conservation effort. If done right, those ghostly stripes might once again become a common sight in Tasmania's wild places, thriving in the modern era. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment with what you would like to see in the following videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.